And this is of a concern to Orwell because he's thinking about the way that there's a problem here. English sucks, we want to fix it. And he's trying to like propose a bit of a solution by saying like you can get out of this habit. Somehow in this little sentence here, he says like you can have thought that can stop the kind of degradation of language, which the way he's thinking about language, I'm not sure if that's true. So that's why we're talking about this. I want to kind of like think about not necessarily a counter argument, but like what might be like a bit of a hole in his argument about language. Yeah, Cooper.
So the whole thing where you can have thoughts about it, I'm wondering what we want to classify emotion as, because you can have emotional thoughts and feelings, but language fails to express them. Because you can be in a situation and you can feel a very certain way, but your language and is very limited by your knowledge of the dictionary, how much you can explain it. And even in the English language, there are just words that don't exist for certain scenarios.
Yeah, good. And sometimes I love those words that are like perfect in other languages. Like German has a bunch of those, like Schadenfreude, which is like joy in other people's pain that we don't necessarily have a word for, right? But you hear them in other languages. So the thought then would be like, okay, so let's say that's, oh, I don't know how to spell it. Let's say that's the concept though. Hang on, I gotta look up how to spell it. This is gonna drive me crazy. I wasn't planning to go down this track. Schadenfreude. Okay, how do you spell it? Okay, have you heard of this concept? So it's like the dictionary says pleasure derived from another person's misfortune. Okay, so that's the question. Is we didn't have this word in the English language. This is just a German word, right? We use it now, so it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to do this. I wish I'd spoke another language so I could do this with another language, but it's not a well-known word, right? So the question is, like Orwell would say, you hear a word like this, and this is going to have some kind of effect on your brain. And it might be the opposite of what he's talking about. Instead of having a vague feeling that we can't put language to, this is actually a feeling that we can kind of solidify in language. So what do you think then that by having this word, that means that Germans are ever so slightly more likely to derive pleasure from another person's misfortune? Hard to say. Cooper?
I think no,
Okay.
because it's a feeling, and honestly, Americans invented American funny home videos.
I love that show. That is my favorite show on television. Everyone gets dressed up in like their Sunday best to watch people get hit, man. Like it's
Yeah, that's
so
the
good. Okay.
entire point of
Yeah.
that. And even though the word is German, the word and that concept may be considered German,
Okay.
it's a human thing. So sometimes you're like, oh man, it sucks to be that guy, but it's funny.
Yeah, so it's like you're still feeling the thing then. So it doesn't really matter if there's a word attached to it. Emotions might be this kind of like pure feeling. But you're right. Do we count that as a thought? I'm not sure. Yeah, Sam.
Well, and every word has its origin. We don't go after Greek and Latin because every single word, good and bad, comes from those words.
Great point. Great point. How can we ever imagine a world that didn't have language? And I think we talked about this a little bit last time. Like you enter into this world, right? And the very first thing you might hear is it's boy or it's a girl. So the very first, one of your very first experiences of this world is that of language. And that language is going to continue to shape how you see things. So we did a little experiment with the cat, right? Because of the word cat and the categories that you have placed around cats, you have a certain kind of like leeway in how you interpret that thing. But none of you thought of a tiger or a lion, even though it is like a feline, right? So language has kind of like limited the scope of certain ideas for you. But does that mean that your thoughts are limited by language? It's interesting. So I like to think about this with something like a little bit more like controversial than a cat, Let's think about this with like the color blue, for example. You enter into this world and you are given a little blue beanie and you're wrapped up in a blue blanket. And what does that mean for you? You're a boy, right? Exactly. So it's kind of like categorized you in this one thing, right? And because you've now seen blue, like blue is the thing that you associate now with this world, it makes sense then that you'd be more attracted to things that are blue. Like blue is me, so I'm gonna like blue, right? So you go to the toy section, you see something that is blue, and you're like, ooh, that's my thing. That's for me, right? And that's just kind of like reaffirms then blue means boy, boy means me. And then you watch television and you watch Paw Patrol back in the good old days. And the Paw Patrol dogs are wearing blue, right? Is that right? I haven't seen Paw Patrol, but I've only seen the little picture of it.
It all depends on what.
Oh, interesting.
Because like the main dog is a police officer.
And he's wearing blue, right?
Wearing blue. He was a brown dog.
Okay. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking of, the police dog that's wearing blue. So you see that and you're like, blue, that's my color, blue means me. So that means that if blue means police, then me and police, that's me, right? And so you might say, oh, I could be a policeman someday because blue is me. And then you see the behaviors that the policeman performs and you think, oh, okay, the way that policeman is exerting authority, or I don't know about Paw Patrol, but policemen in general, or the way that the policeman is kind of like controls the situation, that is me. So now not only does like blue represent just like a beanie or a little blanket to you, blue has this giant connotation of like what it means to be a human for you. And you think about that with any concept then, or any color, and the way it can kind of limit your understanding of things, or maybe not limit, but kind of like associate your understanding of things. Yeah, Cooper.
No, I totally agree with that, and I see that. Like the biggest thing for me was when I was watching Blue's Clues, and then eventually I found out that Blue was a girl.
Blue's a girl and Blue's
Yeah,
Clues?
right? It's so.
Wow,
like,
they're so
I don't know
progressive.
if you-
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Blue was a girl.
It all puts everything.
That's yeah.
Yellow is now gender neutral.
Mhm.
What is that?
I don't know. It always has been, hasn't it?
Oh, why?
That's the other thing. Okay, so that's the other thing. Let's say we have this word blue, and oh, it's written in blue. That's fun. Okay, so in this class, were we the ones? Were we the ones that were talking about the different shades of blue? So some cultures, and I'm not going to be able to name which one, but they can distinguish between all these various little shades of blue, right? And they have names for every single shade of blue. They don't have a name for green though. And so they don't distinguish between blue and green. Green is just another shade of blue. So it's like set up their category then for the color, right? The other thing is like, is my blue the same as your blue? Probably not. It's probably totally different, but we both see it as blue because we know to name it blue. Anyway.
Wait, so they would like wrap their baby in a green blanket. Say, there's a blue blanket for you.
Okay.
That'd be bizarre.
But they would have a name for it, exactly what kind of blue it was.
That is too many names.
So then the other thing about this is the arbitrary quality of it, right? Why did yellow become the gender neutral color? Who knows? It's arbitrary. There's some kind of history behind it, I'm sure. Some, I don't know, the Lindbergh baby used it or something, and someone said something.
Because blue and pink.
So why wouldn't it be purple? Yeah, because it's arbitrary, and the word itself is arbitrary. Why do we have this like loopy thing, this line, this loop, and this loop-de-loop that means blue? And when we read that, we can actually like understand what that means. That's like developed in this like, it doesn't have any association with, does this sound like blue? No, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, Christian. Interesting. Well, I knew in the 1920s, pink was like a very fashionable color for men. Oh,
Well, pink used to
interesting.
be royalty.
Was it purple? I thought
It
it was
was a
purple.
very manly color. Royalty.
And now you don't want to be associated with pink,
I
right?
have like 4
The thing about pink though is that it's not, these colors then are not just neutral. It's not like I look at the color and I see that associated as me now. It is like I look at the color and I look at these other colors and I am not that thing. So it becomes like about opposites too. So suddenly we're starting to think of blue and pink as totally totally opposite colors when they are not, right? They're not opposites on a color wheel. They're not opposites in terms of like our associations even. Like to think of like the opposite of nurturing is controlling. It's like it's dumb to think of genders as opposites, and yet we start to. This is all to say that however we started with language, it does change how we think about things. Linguists have been talking about that forever, how language can kind of like, the words that we use have meaning and they have effects. So it's that idea of 60 stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Words can totally hurt you. Words can also benefit you, but they can actually have not tangible, but like real effects on your brain and how you think. Exactly.
You got camp.
So then let's switch into that actually. Yeah, he said something homophobic, right?
Well, he said something along the lines that if my son ever came home
That's
and
right.
told me that he's gay, I would shoot him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But that was in 2010. Oh, that's not what I was.
Anyone, yeah.
Big,
So it's kind of like that Gia Tolentino article that we read, that like your past self online is just as legitimate as your new self, you know, like they both exist simultaneously.
like Jimmy Fallon blackface in 2000. He got rich.
Jimmy Fallon did? I'm not surprised. I know that guy has a dark past that we don't know about. I know that guy has a dark present that we don't know about actually. Doesn't he? Like there's something like dead behind the eyes.
From New York.
Okay, so then, yeah, this is great. Let's use this as a transition. Let's talk about social media then. What would Orwell think about language now?
I hate it.
I mean, Orwell would think now, especially with social media, that your words can be too easy. Like one simple word online can mean something.
Do you think he would blame that on interpretation, or would he blame that on the person using the word? Nathan?
I think you would blame that on the person before, we talked about like videos. He said like music videos.
Yeah.
So,
But at the same time, he's talking
Yeah.
about idioms. He's also saying how they're like just in everyday life now. So it's like it's almost
Right.
that
So
is causing.
So English is in a bad way, which causes interpretation to be in a bad way, which causes English to be in even a badder way, and so on and so forth. So it's maybe the blame question is, it doesn't make a lot of sense. They're both to blame, but it can have real repercussions then. The same way that his discussion of fascism, by fascism losing its meaning, it has real repercussions, which is that like at the time, Stalin's in charge, you know? Yeah.
Well, and like, you can even see it in, like,
Yeah.
people who don't use it, where like, I see some movies and it's like, what the heck does that mean? You know,
Right.
Youngins, like, like, is that, it's the same kind of thing as like, the more like,
Wait, which side? The old people's language or the young people's language? The young people is the simplifying of the language.
yeah, 'cause the older people who don't.
Right. Okay, so tell me about a word here. All right, speaking of the old and the young. All right, someone try it. Someone explain to me the precise definition of that.
No.
Okay, then explain the definition of wow.
It is a form of exclamation.
Okay, so is it a form of explanation? Is it the same as OMG?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the same.
No.
Well, that's what you say. There you go.
Sheesh.
Then that's like, oh my gosh, shut up.
Right,
You're so
that's,
annoying.
I'm familiar with that.
But if you're like, sheesh, You're like, hey, what's up? That's dope.
Okay, so that's the definition. Hey, what's up? That's dope. Okay, explain that to me in like real English then.
What is dope?
Yeah, explain
Exclamation.
dope.
Well, dope comes from the word dope. It's a drug or a hormone. And it's supposed to cause joy. So when you say something's dope, it means you're inserting dopamine into your brain.
Okay.
Or somebody's doing dope and they're physically taking the item into their physical self.
And that's what it means to say that's dope.
But it's dope because it's causing a form of joy.
Okay, so sheesh is the same thing as saying that's dope, which is the same thing as saying
That's enjoy.
this is enjoyable.
I disagree.
Okay, tell me.
I disagree. So here's the thing, I got on Apex the other day, and there were some middle schoolers who yelled out every sentence.
Okay.
And it did not always mean good things.
Oh, interesting. So is it inappropriate for me to put this on the board?
No,
Okay.
but they would use it where, like, if they died, they would yell it. If they got back alive, they would yell it. If they walked 2 steps, they would yell it, you know?
So it's just an empty exclamation.
Exactly.
Like an automatic
Yeah.
Oh, is it an onomatopoeia? Yeah, maybe. Interesting. Okay, so if it's totally empty, then is it exactly the same as just using an exclamation point then?
But
I would say so.
the word comes to a point where people say it because they think it's funny.
Okay.
So then it becomes a form of comedic relief.
Ooh, I like that. Comedic relief.
And that's why they could say it after they die, like, oh, I'm fresh now.
Okay. Okay. So it can also be a kind of brush off.
It's kind of something you say when you don't know what to say. Like,
Okay, so it's like the word
so the question, oh, it's cold in here when you're talking to someone.
Yeah.
Tired. It sucks.
I see. It's a form of like polite language. It's small talk.
She's just not a small talk.
Imagine having a comment.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So recognition of something special. Maybe that could be it. And alongside this, let's not forget where Emmeline started us with this, which is that this is a sign for young people, right? So it also means I'm young.
Oh
And
man, if I
so
saw a
hip.
9-year-old do that, I think I'm not gonna say that. I'd be so happy.
you would be happy about it?
Yeah.
My favorite thing is ruining words for kids. I used to say yeet all the time. It's
So like,
yeah.
it's different if you did it and if an 80-year-old.
Yeah, if an 80-year-old does it, it's cute, right? Yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh, I want him to be my grandpa.
Yeah.
But if your mom did it, you're like, shut up.
Yeah, it's the middle age, like that.
The 9-year-old guy.
It's like that last breath going
They're fucking expired.
Okay.
That is how Prince Charles died.
All right, so let's pause. How does Orwell feel about sheesh?
Oh,
I'm not gonna say it the way you
You
said it.
would be disgusted by the way.
Why?
Not a word.
He's cranky, yeah, he doesn't like this word because he's just sort of like, doesn't like change, right? Like an old person, but this word specifically would be problematic for him. Like, I feel like there are other slang words like lit, for example, I know that one's old, but I don't know that he'd have as much of a problem with that because it was pretty definable, right? There's something about this word and yeet too, that like is indefinable and it's upsetting. When somebody says, what does that mean? And there is no real definition for it. And we're kind of scrambling around with all of these different things that it can be. And now it can be Prince Philip's dying breath, right? Like it becomes almost meaningless then. Emily?
I don't feel like he was like lit either.
Oh, okay, why?
Because, like, if you don't know, party was lit.
Uh-huh.
That party was not on fire. I feel like that would be like, what?
Good point. It's like a empty metaphor then, which he had a problem with, yeah.
You wanna make it their problem, say, oh, that party was fine.
And then it's even doubly confusing, yeah, okay.
But I think it's going into the fact for Orwell, he wants words to be completely definable and everybody knows what you're saying just by what you say.
Uh-huh.
But the fact is that most of what English isn't the words you say, it's the tone you say it in.
Yeah.
Like you could go up
Sheesh
to,
versus shoosh.
like you could go up to your mom and you had just told her like a secret 5 minutes ago. And now you're talking in front of your dad, and your dad's like, "How was your day?" And you go, "Oh, it was good." And mom like, "It was," and then you go, "It was."
Right.
Shut that up.
Yeah,
I didn't.
yeah. So it's like, he's talking about language and writing. And because of that, he's missing all of the expressive ways that we might use language. And I think a word like this, I mean, isn't, so my nerdy sort of linguistic side of it, it was LeBron that first used it like this, right? In a tweet, or like in an Instagram post or something. At least online, that's where they trace it back to. And so like, he first used it in writing without the expressive abilities. So maybe what Orwell is missing here is that writing can be equally expressive in the words that we use, that it's not precise, right? And that so much of it depends on context. Cooper and then Salute.
Well, and then if you want to talk about those words like fire and lit, oftentimes that can also mean you're smoking something when it got lit. So that can also mean the party was it was awesome. It was
The party was lit because I got lit. Is that?
Yeah, it can also mean that, and that also draws a problem.
Okay,
So
good.
I don't think you would still like those ones, even though they're a little more definable, they still have those double meanings.
Great point. But would Orwell be against language adapting completely? Would Orwell hate the word email? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think he's against the adaptation as long as the thing can be precisely defined, I think, right? Luke?
Orwell just kind of sounds like a language.
Yeah, yeah, tell me more about that. I like that.
Because like, I don't know, like boomers, like they don't love technology, or like they like the idea of it. They're like, oh, that's cool. Like I can send an email on my phone, but like they hate using it or like having to learn how to use it. They just like to stay the exact same.
Right, so they don't mind that it is, if it were their same worldview on a technological device, the problem is that it has changed the world. And I think that's right. Orwell would not like this because it's changing your brains, to use that word. It's changing your brains that you don't, it's like he would say, your expression of exclamation is becoming weaker and weaker as everything equals sheesh. We're gonna say something. That's fine. Okay, I'm gonna give you this article.
I want my one question. I just heard everyone.
That was probably.
Wait, have your other teachers been talking about that?
No, it's just Aiden and I, out of nowhere in math, we go, one of us goes, yeah. And then the whole class will start going.
So it's also got some communal benefit here. It's like they're in a cult, a young person cult.
Yeah, but we're all.
I really just want to look up.
I think lit used to be slang for drunk in like the 40s.
Yeah, it's in old movies. Okay, the article I just gave you is a review of a book. So whenever it is quoting someone, you would use the writer's name, which is McCullough. But then if you were quoting from the text where it's not in quotation marks, it's lie. I don't know how to say it. I hear her name all the time, but I never know how to say it. Salai. That's it. Salai. It's just Salai.
Just think like it's a lie.
Okay, so we're not gonna bother with like quotes within quotes when we're citing this thing, just because this is how I want to do it. This will be last message. So this is a review of McCullough's book, which is called Because Internet, which talks about how language evolves and why it evolves. And I think in this article, she's really focused on the positives of that change. So if Orwell was focused on the negatives of the changing language, she's sort of representing the counter argument here. So ultimately, we're going to write another paragraph, same as we've been doing. And your paragraph is going to be about what is one way the internet is changing language for the better or worse. So worse. So we reading with that in mind, underline a few phrases in this that are going to help you back up your point of view in that paragraph. And read it through. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Yeah, it's what is one way that the internet is changing language for the better or worse. And then I will just read it through now. I'll give you the paper for the paragraph here in a minute. To each other, right? On how to kind of find similarities between the sources, which some of you did, or how to highlight the differences between the two sources, which some of you did. And it's acceptable both ways. So you're now going to write one paragraph, and then we'll move on from this topic. You're going to write one paragraph about one pro or con of internet language. So basically the question is, what is one way that the internet is changing language for the better or the worse? So to narrow this paragraph, you'll choose either one way that it's changing for the worse or one way that it's changing for the better. You're not going to try and talk about both things. Does that make sense? Okay, use my notes on your last paragraph. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to write this paragraph before we go on. Actually, I'm going to give you exactly 10 minutes to write it. So you're using Orwell and McCullough or Salai, whichever one works for you. I do, yeah. Oh, I forgot I can't do that. Hang on. All right, so how many of you guys have already started, based on the description of the assignment, trying to find outside sources to back up your ideas? Raise your hand. Okay, a few of you. Some of you, that might just be because you were getting the ideas first and then you're going to find the sources, which is the order that I usually do things, so that's cool. Or it might be because you're not quite sure where to go to find those outside sources. So we did talk about this once, but it was like right at the end of class and it was very rushed. We're going to use Utah, we're going to use 2 places to find outside sources. Not that you can't use Google, like go ahead and use Google. Just remember that discussion we had about how everything is biased. And so you have to be aware of like which sources are credible and which sources are really not. And how even the credible sources contain some amount of bias, right? Okay, but let's say you want to use something that is peer reviewed, something that has been like very much like peer reviewed means that all the experts have reviewed it and they've decided that yes, this is true. Then you're going to want to use one of our databases. So the first one, this is the one we talked about last time. You find it here. You go to EBSCO High Schools. And the best database for you guys for this assignment is probably Academic Search Premier. And then you'll wait for our slow internet. All right, so now you've got this, and we talked about last time how you want to use advanced search so that you can put multiple search terms together to look for some things. Social media is a topic that everybody is writing about right now, so you do want to use the advanced search for this. All right, raise your hand. This is looking familiar, right? Who is this looking familiar to you? Sorry, that was very confusing. Okay, good. Okay, that's a great database, but let me show you one that is even better. Because it is not regulated by the Utah school system, which decides that, I mean, not that that's not to say it's inappropriate. Like you might find some more inappropriate stuff on this one though, because Utah has a lot of search terms that they limit on Academic Search Premier for secondary education. Jstor, that is not the case. So go to jstor.org, it's JSTOR. And our school pays a ton of money to have access to this. You just need to log in. So go to login. And it makes you log in every time, just as a heads up. It won't keep you logged in. It's Harriman HS. And the password is library, all lowercase. Then I'm going to log in. All right, this one works exactly the same as Academic Search Premier. There is still an advanced search function, and you can add as many search boxes as you want, and I can start looking into social media, linguistics, and see what happens. Oops, I don't want more. Let's just submit it. Okay, I'm gonna have to narrow that down a little bit. Let's do social media, linguistics, and LOL and see what happens. I don't think there's going to be any sheesh articles yet. That one's too new. Okay, we'll see. Let's just do social media and sheesh and see what happens. Yeah, but that's not. No, I don't know why it's coming up. You guys can, because for the rest of class, you get a chance now to try to fill in the blanks on your outline. So basically, you've got this outline now, and hopefully it's detailed in the way that the example outline was detailed. You're going to try and find sources that are going to back up the points that you're already making in your outline. So the reason that I did it in this order is because sometimes I'll get students that will try to format an essay to the sources that they've got. And that's what happened with the American Dream essays a little bit. Like it would be like one paragraph on one source, one paragraph on another. But you want to flip that order. You want to find sources that fit with the argument now that you are making. Unless as you read through the sources, you're like, I better rethink this, turns out I was an idiot, then you can change things around. But for the most part, you're trying to find the sources that back up your thoughts. And when you find those sources, remember to email yourself that source, or you're never gonna be able to find it again. Okay, does anyone have any questions about this so far? Okay, so I'm gonna give you the rest of class. Oh, it's not as long as I wanted it to be, I'm sorry. To start working on this, start finding sources. If you're feeling really lost on this paper, now is the time to come back and talk to me too about it. But just so you know, I will get to, that's my priority, is giving you feedback on your thesis statements for this paper, like as soon as possible. Okay, and just so you know, it's not due next time. We don't have homework for this, and it's due this time.